Hello, Pre-AP Biology. This is the video for September 22nd and 23rd. And so we are in the, the third week of school, I think. And that means we're getting into like some assessments, and I'll be talking a little bit about that because in the next class period, we're going to have our first quiz. But let's go ahead and take a look at the lesson plan, the calendar for today. Again, on my website, you can see, I need to present that screen. So okay, so like always, I think the first thing you should do is fill out the attendance form. Make sure you fill out the attendance form for the correct day for the correct class. Do that first. And then go to the website and take a look at the lesson plan. For the 22nd and 23rd, we are still on Unit 1, Ecology. And our goal for the day, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this so you guys can see it better. Our goal for the day for this video is we're going to start off with vocab list 2. And then I've got some population ecology notes. We covered organism ecology last assignment, so we're moving up to population. And then later on in this week, we'll get to communities, and then next week we'll get to ecosystems. Then I've got a Google form that's going to connect to the last assignment, so I'll walk you guys through that. In today's afternoon synchronous time, I am going to go over your vocab examples and show you guys kind of what to expect on the quiz that we will be taking on whatever that day would be. I guess it would be Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday of this week. So, and the assignment is a Google form, and this is going to essentially be 1 grade for the entire organism and adaptation assignment, including the Flipgrid video, because you can't do this Google form until you've done that. So it is a 100-point assignment. The question we're trying to answer is if we can predict some environmental changes that would lead to an animal population, we could have said plant population, any population really, increasing or decreasing. So that is our goal for the day. And the first thing we're going to do is vocab. If you don't remember where vocab is found, because not many people have done this, go to your Google Classroom, and then in classwork, right underneath the attendance page, I have vocabulary, a vocabulary list. And there's 2 things in here. Remember, there's the definitions for you to look up. And then there are there's your assignment right here. And your assignment looks like this. Okay, now you should, based on last week, have about 8 more words right here. And what I did during the synchronous time is get examples for those over here and just give out a ton of extra credit. So if you want extra credit, come see me during synchronous time, and for bringing in examples that you know for words that use these roots, then you can get tons of extra credit. So so last week we had the terms with list 1, and I'm going to zoom out so we can see it just a little bit better. We had the terms re, cell, hetero, homo, stat or stasis, met or meta, inter and intra, and X, and those all related to the basic characteristics of life and just an introduction to biology. But we've now moved on to ecology, so this week's list, open up your list and pause the video if you need to. The prefix eco, the suffix logi, the prefix pro, the prefix carn, the prefix herb, the suffix vor, although it can also be a prefix, the prefix sapper, the prefix omni, and the prefix a. Okay, so that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 terms. Write those down. You can put list 2 if you want. You can skip a line if you want. All those are up to you. And then take those and find the definition on that other sheet that is in the same vocabulary topic and assignment. And then you figure out your own examples and come tell them to me, and you can get a whole lot of extra credit. I have people sitting in class right now with 105 because they're doing the work and coming in and getting extra credit during the synchronous time. So I'm going to leave those there. By the way, these do show up on quizzes. The understanding of root words show up on quizzes. So if you want some help with this, once again, the synchronous time. All right, moving on to the notes for the day today. It's not super long. You'll hopefully realize that I don't like giving super long notes. This is population ecology, okay? And there's one thing to know about population ecology, and that is that you got to be able to read a graph. There's lots of graphs in biology, in pre-AP biology specifically, and so you have to be able to read graphs, and we'll get to that in just a second. All right, so if we were going to define population ecology, it is the branch of ecological science that deals with population increase and decrease and the reasons behind those changes. And the most common graph that you will see, although there are some others like kind of weird survivorship curves and stuff like that, is a graph of the population over time. That time can be like days, weeks, months, or years. And so all I really put is time right there because it really depends on what kind of organism you're thinking about. And I'll start drawing on that graph in just a second. As we start talking about changes in populations, there's really only two things that can change a population. If births are bigger than deaths, then the population will increase. And if deaths are bigger than births, then the population will decrease. And so what you might have is and we could do this as like a dot plot, and then we would probably connect it with a line because these are continuous data points. You might have a data point right here, and then you might have at one point in time the population is this, and then it is stable for whatever reason. And then maybe for some reason, the population increases and births are bigger than deaths. And if births are bigger than deaths in that time period right there, then it will the population will increase, and then it increases, and then maybe there is a very rapid decrease. We could connect those with a line because they are continuous data points, and we could get something like this. And that would be a pretty standard population graph. And looking at that and understanding, oh, over here, this is a number of individuals, and this is a certain amount of time that that population is growing and reproducing and living and dying and all that kind of stuff. So my example here would be, would be this. So if you have a tree here and that tree is going to produce flowers and pollen and seeds like acorns and stuff like that, well, I'll write this, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3, 3 becomes 4, and 4 becomes 5. And that would be a population has gone from 1 to 5, and it was creating more and reproducing faster than it was dying, and then all of a sudden it starts to die off, and so the population is decreasing at that point. And that's all population ecology is. It's looking at populations rising and falling. All the organisms are the same species, and we're trying to figure out why that might happen. So the question of why makes things a little bit more complicated. And so if we move on to these graphs again, we have to think about the two parts of the graph. And the first part of the graph that you think about is the growth rate. And the difference here is, or the thing to point out here is that different populations grow at different rates. And we use a lowercase r to represent that. In Algebra 2, when you start getting to certain types of curves, you have lots of letters that represent types of curves. And r is something that you use to reference kind of how steep a curve is, a lowercase r. And it really depends on their life strategies. So let's put this back up here. And I'm going to try to draw and see if I can keep this up here. I thought that I could. We will see if I can get it to work. We'll see. All right, so let's say that we have population 1, and it is going like this. And then something changes, and that population starts to grow steadily. I'm not going to do the dots. I'm just going to do the line this time. It grows, and it continues to grow. And it continues to grow, and it continues to grow. And so from the beginning of this graph to the end of this graph, that population increased. And it increased at a slope that we could, it's not a continuous slope. It's an increasing slope. And that would be represented by the lowercase r. Well, we could then change that a little bit and say, well, it doesn't have to be like that. Another group, another population could maybe start going like this. And then it starts to increase, and it increases like that. It has a bigger r. So this one is bigger than that one. And that means it's increasing a lot faster. So let's see if we can figure out kind of what's going on with that by dragging this over here and what might lead to that. It's very difficult for me to move this thing. Okay, let's put it all the way down there. All right, so do I get to? I don't get to. I don't get to. That's okay. We'll picture that. See those picture? Just remember that picture. Okay, so the factors that can affect population growth rate would be birth rates, the number of offspring, the care of the offspring survival. And so you need to think about two kind of individuals, and I always just pick, just kind of not random species, but species that kind of make this easy to understand. If you have something like salmon versus something like an elephant, okay, and that should make this very easy to figure out, and we can toss those graphs back up here real quick. And so it would be something like this right here, and then this right there. Okay, so one of those lines is going to be represented by the salmon, and one of those lines would be represented by the elephant. And hopefully you realize pretty quickly that this one right here is the salmon, and this one is the elephant. I'll just do that. Okay, and the reason is, if you think about salmon and how salmon live in rivers and lakes and streams and all over the world. There's lots of different types of salmon. They do spend time in the ocean as well, and then they swim back into the rivers, and they lay eggs. And when they lay eggs, they lay a lot of eggs. And this is an egg sac from a salmon. And you can see that this is just like one salmon, and you don't even see the whole thing. There are hundreds and hundreds of eggs inside there, and every single one of them is released all at the same time. And every single one of those can become a salmon. And over here, the elephant, a single female elephant that is of breeding age, when it starts to have offspring, it takes 2 years for the pregnant elephant to for the fetus to grow big enough to give birth. So that's 2 years for one elephant, or that is 1 year for hundreds of salmon. And that means in certain conditions, salmon population can increase a lot faster than elephant populations. And we call that part of the graph the R portion for the growth rate. The elephant populations will increase, but just not as fast. And so the salmon populations increase a lot faster. And hopefully you're also realizing, well, that's not possible, because all of a sudden we're way up here and we've got, I don't know, just millions and millions and millions of salmon in this one little tiny river. And that's not okay either. And that's where you get to the second part of this growth curve. And we call that the carrying capacity. Limited resources can set a maximum number of organisms that can survive in a particular environment. So the same exact graph, population and time, you'll see that I'm repeating this right here. And we have trees this time. We're back to the trees, and we have 5 trees, and all these 5 trees are alive in a field. And one more tree kind of grows out of an acorn that falls in between these, and it's surrounded by all these other tall trees. And that's where we get carrying capacity. There are factors that will limit the population growth, the carrying capacity, and that is a lack of space, a lack of resources, and carrying capacity can also change. We'll get to this later on in a second. I want to draw the graph here, but and so we'll come back to this, like I said, in just a second. So on the graph, I'm going to draw a couple of things. Carrying capacity is drawn as a dotted line. That we represent with the capital letter K. The K is, again, it's an Algebra 2 term label there, and it means a limit, and it's something that the number, that the graph, the line doesn't like to get to that limit. So if you're in Algebra 2 or whenever you are, you will probably see that variable thing that is labeled as K. And so if we think about this population of trees, the tree population was increasing at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we got up to 5, and that environment could support 5. So at this point in time, births was much bigger than deaths at this point of the population growth curve. And as we get closer, one of those is going to change. We need to think, as a population gets close to the carrying capacity, does births change or does deaths change? And these trees don't know about carrying capacity. They don't know that they have reached the carrying capacity, so they need to stop reproducing. So they keep reproducing. So births is relatively constant because that is a factor of how that species lives and survives and just what it does. Deaths is not constant. Deaths is it will vary based on the lack of resources. And as the resources become limiting, deaths increase. And if deaths increase, then like we said at the beginning, deaths become more than births. And if deaths are more than births, then the population will stabilize. and it'll stabilize right at K. When you're above carrying capacity, deaths are greater than births. So technically we have 6 trees down here at the bottom of this one, and the carrying capacity is 5. So what's going to happen to the little tree? It's going to die. It will not survive, and that's going to bring the number back here to 5. And then when we're back underneath this, we have births is now bigger than deaths, and so another one can grow if there's space. So that is a much more accurate population growth curve. In my senior class, my AP class, we cover all of the math that goes into predicting the shape of this, and it's very much a math-heavy class. So, but that's what you should expect to see. There's one more thing that you can think about when it comes to population growth curves, and that would be, let's get rid of this, how different species actually exist and what their curve might look like. Because you can actually have very different population growth curves. And so we call them 2 different things. We call them either an R-selected species, because they spend more time in the R portion of the graph, or a K-selected species because they spend more time in the K portion of the graph. And so let's put 2 graphs up here, and I'll draw those graphs real quick, and then I'll make them disappear, just because I think you guys will get this. But if they spend more time in the R, and let's put the same thing right here, K is right there. Now we know that K is right there. If they spend more time in the R portion of the graph, they have probably small organisms, relatively speaking. They might be short-lived. They have lots of offspring with little parental care, so think about the salmon. Lots of death in certain situations, but also populations can boom really big and really fast. But that also means they crash, probably because they harm the environment in some way. And so what you end up with is something like this, where the population goes way up, it's way above carrying capacity, and then it crashes. And then it does it again and again. And that means that these organisms are spending a lot of time in that growth portion of the population growth curve. So we just call them R-selected as a species because they spend so much time doing that. And then over here we have the K-selected species. And so with those, they would be increasing slowly, slowly, slowly. And when they do get to K, or carrying capacity, they spend a lot of time just hanging out up there. They can still have populations crash, but if everything kind of stays the same, then the births and deaths are going to stay relatively constant. So population is going to stay relatively constant. And you get 2 very, very different graphs, just depending on the species. And over here, they would be larger, long-lived, few offspring, like the elephants, lots of parental care, and relatively stable populations. So I wanted to come up with 2 examples and show you how you don't always get what you expect. And so my examples of species, we could definitely have the gorilla. Okay, the gorilla, a family of gorillas, I don't know exactly what you call a group of gorillas. They would definitely be a K-selected species, long time with parental care, very similar to humans, years and years and years of parental care before the gorilla is able to kind of take care of itself. And over here we would have roaches. Roaches in an ideal situation, like someone's house where there's no predators or something like that, the population can just boom and increase really, really rapidly. But then, if the food runs out that they have as a resource, then the population can crash just as fast. But it's not always, and people tend to think of this as mammals as K-selected and insects and fish as R-selected, because you can get some mammals over here on R and non-mammals over here on K. And so right here I've got a saltwater crocodile, and a saltwater crocodile is a very large reptile, and they do, not mammals, so they don't produce milk or anything like that, but they do have parental care, and these guys are known for carrying their offspring in their mouth at least for a while, and that really increases the survival of their offspring. And when they make nests, they don't have too many eggs in the nest, so they can care for the ones that do hatch. And over here on the left side, we've got mice. Mice, while they're mammals and they do produce milk for their offspring, the amount of time that is required for the offspring is really short, and they produce lots of offspring, and the population can boom really, really fast. So R and K selected species, and that is population ecology. All right, the assignment today is to finish off the organism adaptations page from last week. And the way to do that is by completing this Google form that will be attached to this video. And so what it says is if you have made it and submitted your video on your organism and its adaptation, then you can continue this form. Otherwise, you need to go back to the previous assignment I will not grade this form unless you have submitted a video. Okay, so the final grade for this is going to come from this form, but I don't grade the form until I see the video. You get your links for your Flipgrid right here, and this is to the group, so make sure you're looking at the organism videos. Watch 2 videos made by your classmates and answer the questions to learn about 2 other adaptations. I wanted you guys to kind of see your classmates and see what kind of work they're doing, and I think that's kind of helpful when we're stuck on our computers like this. So first name, last name, class period, and then you're going to do 2 videos, and I'm only going to read the first one because the second questions are the exact same. What is the common name of the organism chosen? What is the scientific name of the organism chosen? And I need to change that to short answer. Identify the adaptation that was explained in the video, and you can just list that. Mine would be thumbs. And then in a complete sentence or a few complete sentences, explain how this adaptation helps the organism live in and survive in its environment. If the video that you choose to look at doesn't actually do this, then you can't use that video. So if it doesn't list the common name or the scientific name, or if they forgot to do adaptations or explain the environment, then don't use that video, and that's fine. Pick another one. They're only like 1.5 minutes long, so it really shouldn't take you very long. And again, the second one is the exact same, but I wanted y'all to see 2 separate videos from 2 separate classmates and peers, so that you can kind of learn from them a little bit. So let me stop sharing that. Okay, so that is Tuesday and Wednesday's video and assignment. And I will, like I said, talk about the quiz on the next one, but you do have a quiz, and that quiz covers organism ecology and population ecology, and also the characteristics of life would be the content of that quiz. But I will talk about that more in synchronous. I'll put a notice up on Google Classroom on what y'all should be studying. And in synchronous time, I can kind of answer some questions about what it might look like, but I will also explain that in the next video. I hope you all had a good weekend, and I will see everyone in the afternoon synchronous time. Bye.